sad news that I couldn't make eye tracker to work in this configuration. So instead of having the workshop, we will just have like a lecture. Anyway, you had the other eye tracker yesterday, Katz, and you already know how it works. Did you have a hands-on experience as well?
Eyes on.
Eyes on. You just watched. But someone of you was the person who was studying, participated in the study, right?
Yeah.
All of you, or some?
Well, no, most of us. Yeah.
Most of you.
We were playing a game that, when you look at like a target, then the target blew up. So then you should look at some targets and have to avoid others. So you have to control your gaze around the screen.
Okay, so this was eye tracking based interaction.
Yeah.
And that's the very cool stuff. You can do it. You can design this kind of interactions by your own as well. If this eye tracker you saw yesterday, if it has the API. Yeah, and there are also free free eye tracking solutions that you can use just based on your laptops or mobile phones webcam. It's really imprecise, but however it works. Let's go on with the eye tracking. The principle of eye tracking. Did they explain this yesterday? No, it's easy. Inside the eye tracker, there is infrared camera, which is one of the components. It's actually a cheap component compared to the eye tracker itself. This is a scientific eye tracker, and the price is about $5,000. So we expect from this eye tracker probably more than the eye tracker you played with. But it has infrared camera, and it has infrared light source inside it. You can't see, it won't disturb you, but it produces the tiny light spot in your eye, like this here. And what is most expensive with eye trackers, that's the image analysis software. The software which runs all the time and analyzes all the eye tracking data to calculate the gaze point. And this eye tracker, for example, does records 50 or 60 packages of data per second, so the software must run quite quickly. And what this software does is it detects the center point of your pupil, which is a reference point, and then there is a reflection of the light, a little spot in the eye, and the software detects this light reflection. Well, and to see or to calculate where the person looks, it requires to calculate the distance between those two center points and the direction or the vector from the center point of eye to the light spot. And that's it. First of all, eye tracker needs to be calibrated. You probably did the calibration with your device as well, and it had probably 1 point or 3 points or 4 or more.
3 points.
3 points. Yeah. This eye tracker has 9 points shown on the small image on the right side, and it calibrates with the participant. and this calibration is personal. If the individual changes, then the eye tracker needs to be calibrated again. There was a question in previous group that what happens if we use the previous calibration for several people. Sometimes it works, but it is not so precise. You cannot do it in a scientific studies because scientists always need to use valid data. But in some cases, the calibration cannot be done. We had one study with disabled children. They were mentally disabled, autistic children, and we used average calibration that we did, for example, with some grown-up or with a normal person who is able to understand what to do while calibrating.
What's the reason behind the difference? Is the eye bigger or smaller, or why are two people having different results?
Yeah, it's the shape of eye, the surface, the reflecting surface of eyeball the shape is different. So that even if a participant looks at the same point with different people, the distance on the camera image with the center point of the eye and the light spot is slightly different. We can see people's eyes look the same, but those are really they have small differences. I don't know if it is up to the color of the eye, or but some people are smaller, some people are bigger. Eyes are smaller and bigger, and the curvature or the physical shape is different. So that's why we can't calibrate instead of others. But however it works, it just gives a little bit imprecise results. Let's go further. Here, let's speak about eye tracking data. While you played the eye tracker, you didn't have any data visualizations. Probably it was just a game. In our studies, we can have the gaze visualization or the numeric data, or both of them. And the visualization can have two different forms, which both are good for their specific purposes. One way to visualize a gaze is to record the fixation points and saccades, as shown on the upper image. Fixation points are where the gaze is fixed for a while, and when gaze moves to the next fixation point, then the saccade will appear. And as you see, all the fixation points are those saccades are straight lines. It's almost always people cannot drive their gaze in the curved line. It's very hard to do. One option is to follow the moving object on the screen. For example, if you move mouse, then the gaze will try to move smoothly as the cursor moves, if it is fixed to the cursor. But if you look the movement of gaze more closely in detail, then you see that the eye always does a little bit jagged line or zigzag instead of the smooth curve. So that's why human gaze behaves like jumping from one point to other point. Those are the points of interest, and the attention goes from one point to other point on the straight line. And by the way, quite quickly, these moves happen. So this was one way of visualization is saccades and fixation points, and it's good for studying videos or the computer usage where the situation changes all the time. Like video is moving picture, and the computer interactions are also like moving the objects or changing the screen all the time. So other way of doing to visualize eye tracking data is to make heat map. It's the image below, so that in this case, for example, if we show the slideshow, each slide durates, let's say, 6 seconds, and after the slide is shown, there will be 6-second heat map, and it shows where the participant looked during these 6 seconds. We cannot detect exactly where were the fixation points or how the saccades appeared, but we know which were most interesting areas on that picture. So this heat map system is better for visualizing when you study static images. It doesn't make sense if the picture changes all the time and the point of interest moves around on the screen, appears here and there. Then the heat map will not be informative. Okay, and then we have numeric data, and the numeric data comes on the timeline. So each measure will be placed on the timeline, and as you probably will make psychological experiments. Then you can have 2 timelines. One timeline corresponds to your stimuli when you did something, and other timeline corresponds to the measured data. So in case of eye tracking, we will have, as a most important measure, we will take the gaze coordinates in the time. From gaze coordinates in the time, we can already detect the fixations, build up the saccades, and also up to the fixation time, we can build up the heat map. What else can we do? We can count the fixations. And it is based also on gaze coordinates. But there is one more measure that isn't the gaze coordinate, but it is for psychology, it's very important measure. It's pupil size. As you all may know, pupil size corresponds to arousal, or is correlated to the arousal level. So the pupil pupil diameter will increase when people are aroused or have more attention to some point. However, you should also keep in mind that pupil size also reacts to the light. So when you show some stimuli, and there are different levels of light. For example, on the computer screen, you can have white screen, then the pupils will shrink, and when you have the dark screen, there are less light, pupils will grow. and this is the physiological reason why the pupil size changes. But the psychological reason happens independently. It's based on the thinking of the person or the stimuli the person is reacting to. So let's take a look to the numerical data. Here is the eye tracking data package in XML format, and this format is based on open eye gaze data. That's the standard to be used with eye trackers. This eye tracker here uses exactly that kind of data packages. In the beginning, there is the calibration data. So it obviously, while I took this package from the start of the data file, it doesn't have calibration yet. So the valid calibration points are 0 and the error is 0 as well. It's the software version which was used, and screen size. As we are checking on the screen, then we need to know the screen size to calculate, for example, the exact location of the gaze. What comes next from here on? This is now the actual eye tracking data package. And in the first variable here is a count. As I already told, this makes 50 measurements per second, and 50 similar packages of data will be recorded each second. So those files will grow quite big if we, for example, have some half an hour or even more eye tracking sessions. So the count counts each package. Next is time. The time and count, they both start when the calibration is completed. And the third is also sort of time. It's called time tick, and it is system time. If you have the system time recorded in the data package, you can easily synchronize all your measurements in the same computer, because the system time or the Windows time tick is the same for all the applications that run at the same time. And the time tick actually enables 1 millisecond precision of synchronization. And that's probably enough for all kinds of psychological experiments. It's what kind of data you usually measure while doing the psychological experiments? For example,
reaction time probably.
Yeah. It depends on what you want to measure, because you have the line skin response, it is 75 also.
Yeah.
You can also have it's an EEG, you can also have the signals from the brain.
So sometimes some of those devices allow the time tick to be recorded. And if you have 3 different software, each one records its own data, EEG for one software, then the eye tracker, and then the galvanic skin response on the third. So later on, each timeline has the time tick, and you can align those timelines together and see what changes happen in each of the time moments. So that's a cool thing, but unfortunately, in practice, it's not so easy, because all those companies that produce different software, they want their own software to be the master software. And it's really disturbing. So I would use the open eye gaze data format, which is open format. You don't need to pay to use this, and you can then look for other open software packages that enable this. For example, if you use the EEG measurements and galvanic skin response, what research software was there used then?
I don't know. I was a participant in the study, so I don't know. I wasn't, behind
MATLAB.
Oh, okay. It's MATLAB and R. Those are good for for statistics. Yeah. But I know that some of psychology field they use either E prime or PsychoPy.
For presenting the stimuli?
Yes, for presenting the stimuli and synchronously recording the data.
Now we use
Okay. So MATLAB is most known for you. Okay. Yeah, I used MATLAB as well, but recently I started to use R much more because it's free. Oh, let's go to the data because it's already, time is pressing on. Time, of course, and POG always in this means point of gaze. And if POG is followed by X, it's coordinate X, and Y corresponds to coordinate Y. If here, in the beginning of, before the POG is fixation, then let's go to the LPOGX, and then there is RPOGX. What might those mean? What do you think? Left and the gaze coordinates of left and right eye, exactly. And later on there is BPOG, which means best point of gaze, and that's the average of left and right. Sometimes people blink. Sometimes they blink one eye, sometimes they blink both eyes, and at these moments the data is lost. But if only one eye is valid, the other one is lost, let's say the blink was, then in this case the eye tracker uses only the valid eye for reporting data. So the best point of gaze is normally the average, but in case of invalid eyes, the use of other eye has been reported. Next, it's LPD, and somewhere here is RPD. That's the pupil diameter. And pupil diameter doesn't use any length measure units. It's arbitrary measure, and it is the measure, the numbers of compared to the camera image pupil diameter, and compared to calibration moment. So if for example, here is 1185. It's probably the size in pixels on the camera image, and the reference measure has been taken while the eye tracker was calibrated. Together with pupil diameter, there is another measure called OPS, I think this one, yes. And this is the distance. As we do the eye tracking studies in the computer screen, the user doesn't fix the distance to the camera. The camera is inside here. The user normally shifts further and closer and to the left and to the right, and that's why the pupil size on the camera image varies a little bit. So the real pupil size is actually the distance from the camera multiplied to the camera image pupil size. Yes?
Why would we need them separately anyway?
Separately,
why doesn't the program calculate these?
I don't know. Actually, some of those measures in this data set are already calculated because pupil size is one measure that has been measured or taken as a quantitative primary data, and the gaze coordinate is the other measure. For example,
I just wonder whether there is any case when I would need that raw pupil data, or would it be more sensible for the program to actually calculate the actual pupil diameter or in these arbitrary values for me?
okay.
Why do I need 4 columns of data if I could have 2?
That's right. The distance to the camera sometimes might be the useful data. So we can calculate out of the distance something, even something psychological. For example, if something frightens the user, there is a reflection that the user tries to get away or moves himself a little bit further from the screen.
But so still, what about raw pupil data? To use it anywhere as it is, this relation depends on the distance. So
probably this. Sometimes I wonder the same things that you, because these are just built into the machine, and it takes to read a manual to understand everything that how the system works, and we need to take it in account while we study.
By the way?
Mirametrix.
So
Mirametrix.
it's the company.
It's a Canadian company.
Okay.
We know the big two are SMI and Dobby, and this is probably some of those next. A little bit cheaper, but the price scale is in the same point. Well, so the eye tracking data is here. We already spoke about gaze, how the gaze behaves, about the pupil size, and one thing we spoke about the attention, that we will see where the people look, where the interesting spots are, the arousal, which could be calculated upon the pupil size, and mental load as well. And it's the correlation, there is a correlation between gaze activity, or the count of fixations, and the mental load. So that's how the mental load has sometimes been calculated or assessed. Yes?
You told that the tube decreases if we look on the white surface, and
yes.
It increases if we look on the dark surface. Do you happen to know whether it decreases or increases if I just think about the dark surface or light surface?
No, it doesn't change. The pupil size, depending on the light, it's subconscious. You cannot probably. Well, there are some drugs that allow you to increase your pupil size. But at least I have no evidence if someone can actually increase the pupil by their own will, like it does with the light. Light, it changes automatically. It's like the automatic exposure in the photo cameras. It's subconscious, yes. And shall I wrap up? Yes, just about the errors, and then it is over. First, when you blink, the machine cannot see where you look. Sometimes you can get out of the camera range. For example, the camera looks this way, and and if you move too much to the side, you will go out of the camera. Then, if the participant wears glasses, the glasses give the same similar reflections as the surface of eyeball, and in this case, there will be errors while doing the eye tracking. And sometimes, when you do the eye tracking on the computer screen, the gaze goes out of the screen. Actually, in some extent, the coordinates will be reported even outside the screen, but not too much. For example, gaze down out the screen might mean that the user looked at the keyboard. If someone attracts the attention on the background, the gaze can go out of the screen on some direction. So this is how the errors happen, and sometimes you can interpret these errors as well. Good, and that's. I need to finish the lecture. Hope you enjoyed it, and if you have questions, just ask it later when we have a coffee.
You can get to a few quick questions.
Yes. Quick questions. Yes.
I would have one. You said that there are possibilities for research, but are there any everyday applications of eye tracking that are out there that some will use accidentally, or that will be happening in a few years?
Yeah. Yes, of course. Recently, we had a course in Tallinn University in our institute, the course of psychological computing or physiological computing, or take it as you like. So this course was exactly about designing the interactions with the use of different physiological or psychophysiological sensors. So all the roads are open. Just go and design them.
I have one application from my field. It's virtual reality. Is that in order to really get the maximum quality, it would be smart to just render this part of the image that the person is looking at, because the resolution outside of the fovea is really bad for vision. So we need eye tracking to optimize.
This eye tracker has depending on the person or how well the calibration was done, the precision on the screen surface is about 1 to 3 centimeters. So you can have the random error within 1 to 3 centimeters. It is enough to target the button with a diameter of 3 centimeters if you design the interactions. But we also did the study of translators writing the text and reading the text. To be within the error limits, we used a little bit larger text. There was a 1.5 centimeters gap between lines, and then we were able to detect where the gaze goes throughout the reading and later on while writing the text as well. So the screen was probably a little bit bigger, but this is an example of the precision of this eye tracker. And as I said, or I didn't yet say, this eye tracker is about 5 years old. And newer models are more precise. Any more questions? Here are some differences as well.
All right.
Thank you.